Casey?
Here's Bruce, so
Here's
that's
Bruce.
a start.
Okay. Hi. Morning. Hey, thank you everyone for being patient with us this morning. I think what we're proving to ourselves is having governance only time in the morning is probably really helpful because it gets clarity amongst ourselves. So we've made a couple of decisions and we've got a bit of a plan for this morning. I'm going to kick us off, and if I get it, sorry.
Oh, kia ora. Just before we continue, just noting the general interest that I have as a member of the Waikato River Authority.
Oh, yes.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Charlie. So I'm going to kick us off on the decisions we've made and how we're going to run this hui. Okay. If we're not clear or you're unsure, please just ask us any questions. So, and no apologies.
And there are none. We've taken over the... and we've just had our first disclosure of interest. So are there any other disclosures of interest just before we go?
Yes, for me, through the chairs, I'm also a member of the Waikato River Authority.
As am I, but I'm assuming that our declarations from the last one carry over.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, councillors. Okay, so where we've got to. This committee would like to ask Te Rōpū Hautu to spend the next 3 to 4 months coming up with a decision roadmap. And what we would like to see, and we are open to advice, is what is the outcome we're trying to achieve? Are we all in agreement that that outcome is appropriate? Because I think that's the first point. And then working us backwards to decisions and key strategic conversations we need to have as a, I'm going to be bold and use the word co-governance committee.
And that during the journey of that 3 to 4 months, each group will refer back to their governors in the development of that, so that it's not in isolation and we turn up here in 3 months and it's a surprise.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the aim is we will come back together in 3 or 4 months with a really clear roadmap of where we are going and how we are going to get there that has been tested within each side of the shop. Okay, that's the first decision we've made. The second decision or offering that has been put on the table is when the new Waikato Regional Council is formed, that each of the river iwi are going to offer up to the councillors to come to place, to see the mahi happening in their rohe, but also more importantly to ground them in the settlement. And we may choose to do that together and we may choose to do that separately. We'll get to that point, but that's the second action. The third is a resolution on the basis of those 2 items that the Waiora committee is putting a resolution to the Waikato Regional Council that this committee is important and it needs to be retained in the next council triennium. Yep, I'm just double checking that we're all kapai. Look, hey, I'm not going to, we've already had the debate about co-governance. I'm not going to die in a ditch over the word because we'll end up having a big debate. But the point is that this committee is reaffirming the importance of us to the next Waikato Regional Council. Waiora Co-Governance Committee. Yep. Okay, any questions from staff on that? Tracy?
Co-Chair, if I can just make a couple of things, I think. So in regard to the first decision, that is something that we had already had on our books to do. I guess it was just waiting for the legislation that Naomi will talk to in her next report, and also very mindful of what may come in the next couple of months of government. So that is something, at the moment, we're just in an unclear space, but that is entirely doable. So something in the new year that maps that out. If there are any key junctures or key decisions that the committee itself would like, I guess, identified during that would be helpful for staff, and they can either be fed back through, well, through any of the Te Rōpū Hautu members, I think would be the best way to do that. In respect to the second matter, so I know Mali, our Poutuhono, is also in charge of our councillor induction process, and that is something that the executive here at WRC has already had some signals from our iwi partners around reaffirming the importance of the partnership. And we've had some overtures from, it was either Te Wharitō or Te Nihi Nui for our councillors, our new council, to have visits. So that I think would be welcomed, and we'll forward that on, make sure that it's captured as part of our council induction program. Just, I think, to set expectations, councillors have a lot of kind of work in the induction that'll need to occur in the first 6 to 8 weeks. So it might be this side of Christmas, or it will likely be in the new year, I think. So just want to be clear there, but we'll forward that on to Mali. And with respect to the third, well, the one that will come through as a recommendation resolution from the committee through to council, we know it's in the existing terms of reference that the committee will continue, so it will be useful to have that for our new council, but ultimately it will of course be the new council's decision.
Yeah.
But in saying that, we also have our statutory responsibilities under the JMA to go through the process anyway, should it to go through an alternative process if a Waiora committee isn't formed.
So thank you for those comments, Tracy. We don't want to get into backwards in a debate, because I think we're quite clear in the steps we want Te Rōpū Hautu to follow. But just for clarity, we are quite clear and certain that over the next 3 to 4 months, we do want that decision roadmap. We appreciate the lack of clarity and uncertainty that council might feel. We're not so convinced that there is that lack of clarity, but that's for Te Rōpū Hautu to go and knuckle out. Appreciate the timing. I mean, River Iwi are busy as well, so that's all ka pai. And yes, we did note in the terms of reference the ability for the committee to be retained, but we felt it was important to reiterate that to council, so thank you for that. Any other comments, questions?
Just a
Sorry,
comment.
Jack.
Yeah, just if we can add in the briefing sessions over the next 3 to 4 months as well.
So it will come back via Te Rōpū Hautu key themes and matters that we think should be included as part of that decision roadmap. We've got 2 questions online.
So Dave wanted to speak at this point. Do you want to introduce yourself, Dave?
Kia ora tātou. I'm Dave Doggart, Team Lead of Democracy. You've probably all seen me before in one capacity or another. So apologies for lateness. I've been tied up in another meeting. I just thought I'd pop in and just on a procedural note, just mention that a resolution, and I may have got the tail end of this, so please correct me if I'm wrong, that the resolution about the retention of the committee, it's kind of a little bit outside of what's on the agenda to be discussed. And I would recommend that the committee record a couple of action points rather than a resolution. And when staff present the minutes to council, we will collate those action points and incorporate them into the minutes, rather than trying to resolve your way through an item that's not actually on the agenda as such.
Yeah, we're comfortable to take your lead on that one, Dave.
Yep, no problem at all. But if you have any questions or need any help in that respect, just let me know.
Thank you. Thank you. There's another question online, is there?
Okay, it's been flagged
Oh,
away. Yep.
okay. Jack, did you have a question? No? Okay.
I think Dave's totally correct. We don't want to jump outside of where we're meant to play, and I think that is very good.
No, good catch. Good catch. Okay. So that's where we got to. Now I'm going to take us through to the agenda. Hey, now first and foremost, we do really want to thank staff, WRC staff and Te Rōpū Hautu. Quite clearly, a lot of effort has gone into this agenda pack with some really good, dense information. So certainly, we do want to thank you and acknowledge the work. We would like to propose a slightly different way of going through the agenda. Rather than spending 30 minutes each on RM, engagement, structured reporting, we would like to take those agenda items as read. Really keen for if there are key top notes that staff want to raise with us, but then allow a little bit of time for the governors and councillors to put a few thoughts in. We're not necessarily asking for them to be answered, they're just for things for staff to consider.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. We're in your hands, how you want to run the meeting. I do have probably just 2 messages on item 7.1. I think would be useful for the committee to hear.
Yeah. And look, I know what it's like when you're a staff member and you have slogged your guts out on an agenda item and a slide deck, and then the governors roll in and want to do something differently. Please don't take that as any disrespect to the work or any lack of confidence in the work. Take it as we have confidence in your work, we have read it, and we will put the questions to you. Yeah? And I'm going to do minutes first? Yeah, sorry. So before we go into the agenda, we're going to do minutes. Noel's moved. Evelyn's happy to second. No one against? All in favour? All right, okay. Carried. Done.
Very good.
Okay, first agenda item, 7.1, Resource Management Act Amendment. Again, please staff take the paper as read. Really keen for you to point to us any top notes, high notes you want us to particularly clock, and then keen for the floor to be opened for questions or reckons. Again, you don't need to answer them if you just need to catch them. So, and if you need a moment to recalibrate, please say so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we're all good. The one message that I would like to convey in public is to reiterate that the recent Amendment Act to the RMA does not stop Plan Change 1 in its going through its process. It has no influence at all on Plan Change 1, as appeals were received to Plan Change 1 and the matter is before the court. So any decisions in regard to Plan Change 1 sit with the court, not with council. The last decision that council must make is once we have a final version from the court, council must make the plan operative. We will be putting some messages on our website to that effect, as there is a bit of misinformation out there in the public at the moment in response to this act. So we'll be putting those on the website this afternoon.
Thank you. is that your end? Any questions, reckons? Go, Jack.
Kia ora, Tracy. Just looking for your, I guess, confirmation of my understanding anyway, that given the treaty settlements that are bringing this committee together and Te Ture Whaimana, that the plan stop provisions that are proposed has no effect on that.
Through the chairs, so stepping to the side of Te Ture Whaimana and stepping to the definition of the plan stop provisions, section 80 because the plan change one is a proposed plan that has travelled to the court, it is not captured by the provisions. Subsequent sections refer to plans that are part of treaty settlements. So it would be, I would say, in a secondary matter captured by that, but by the very definition, it's not captured. Also in the Cabinet minute of March of this year, there was a very clear decision of government that arrangements under existing treaty provisions would be upheld through RM reform. That is what we've got. It's a Cabinet minute, and we've got the Act that refers to plan changes that are beyond the council decision process. So I'm very comfortable that plan change one is not impacted.
And the process that we're undertaking now?
The freshwater plan review, that's a different conversation. However, as Naomi had in her report, we'd already had a change in the Act previously, I'm going to say earlier this year or late last year. October last year, that said we cannot notify anything before 2027. So the new plan stop provisions, and they are not stopping a plan, they are stopping the notification of the plan. However, in the MFE fact sheet, it says what won't stop: work that councils do before notifying a change. So from my perspective, we carry on in a prudent manner, but that work is in fact not stopped. The sector, the local government sector, has conveyed to the Ministry for the Environment that calling something a plan stop and heading up your fact sheet as a plan stop is not actually been helpful for us messaging out to our communities.
Yes. Sorry. Yep. God. Okay, just had a partai here around the performance standards and ensuring that there's a robust process that would quantify the reduction of adverse effects over time. So I just noticed that there was a piece around performance standards, and that as long as there was a reduction over 10 years or something to that effect, that yeah, you could continue doing what you're doing as long as over 10 years. But how do you measure that? So it's, as Maria has said, I'm not expecting you to have the answer right now, but we would expect that there would be some robustness in the modelling that is being used, or people would need to use to prove that there is actually a reduction to the adverse effects of their activity.
I'll just add an associated question to that, because in the bit that I don't understand, Trace, is if you look at how long PC1 has taken and we roll out a variation or similar otherwise in the Waiho catchment, we have to assume there's going to be some changes to the processes as well as to the RM to ensure that, as you say, Evelyn, we can give effect to that within 10 years. Otherwise, if under the current scenario, we couldn't, you know. And if I was Ecologic Foundation or something, I'd pick up a stake.
Just to add on to that, it kind of contradicts itself too, because the S70 enables councils to do stuff into permitted activity in there, and yet it contradicts after that to say that, you know, as long as it doesn't have a long term, well, it doesn't add up to me. You know,
no, and that was kind of my follow-on partai was just around that permitted activity, discharge as a permitted activity. What would that look like?
Does staff want to have a crack at responding, and there's no pressure, or just want to percolate on those questions that have been posed to you?
There's probably better people than me to respond, and I'm looking at Mike, who's quickly scribbling. What we do know is I guess the sum of the parts to say things are getting better or worse is incredibly complicated. You know, that's one thing we learned through the CSG that Trustee Forrest was sat on at the time, that there's not one thing, and we know there is a lot in the system at the moment, the lag, the groundwater, all of that. So it's very difficult to actually quantify that. And it's also kind of difficult understanding, could we get a measure from when Plan Change 1 was notified over the last 9 years? What we have got is more monitoring sites, and we've got more data. It is a challenging question. Mike, is there any insights you can offer?
Kia ora koutou, through you, Chair. So we are doing some thinking with myself and some of the senior resource use directorate folks, particularly around that section 70, and also the consenting of activities where there are already impacts. Given the scale of consenting that, for example, is going to be required under PC1, the implications of where are things degraded, and therefore what that might mean in terms of permitted activity status or consenting. We're looking at trying to identify sort of an initial broad brush, if you like. So we know that as catchments become more and more developed, for example, with pastoral agriculture, we tend to see greater impacts on downstream water bodies. So we're looking at, I guess, from our extensive monitoring programs, being able to understand at what level of development within a catchment could we make a reasonably safe assumption that the water bodies are degraded to a defined state, and that will then help us make those decisions about whether permitted activity status is appropriate or whether controlled activity status can be granted.
Gannon, go ahead.
Kia ora through the chairs. Just some clarification from Tracy in regards to the plan stop provisions. Can you tell me if the Waikato, Waipa and the Taupo catchments, including Area M of the Maniapoto claims settlement, are not subject to the plan stop provisions? I heard you say that PC1's not affected, but I just wanted to know if the settlements are affected at all. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Gannon. So Plan Change 1, I guess it's the difference between process and geography. So because Plan Change 1 is going through a process, it is not impacted, but those provisions of the plan stop apply across the entire country to any plan that isn't notified or hasn't got to the appeal stage. So it applies across the entire country. Does that make sense?
Yes, so we're not there yet, that's what you're saying.
Correct, yep.
Thank you. Kia ora.
No, I think, and Trace, you correct me if I misheard, I think what you're saying is, in your view, yes, plan stop does apply to those areas to which the river settlement applies. Because that's the question Gan's asking you is, does the plan stop provision apply over river settlement areas?
Yes, it does, and that's why it applies to the freshwater plan review that we're going through now. So it applies to anything that hasn't got to a hearing.
But then how does that go to the minister's kōrero around settlements being upheld within that process?
The plan stop proposed plans or parts of plans where the proposal is required by or gives effect to an obligation under a treaty settlement. So that's specified, but it's where it's at in the process, and because we haven't got to a hearing, it is still covered by it. Yeah. And irrespective of the plan stop provisions, the changes to the Act last year put a new provision. The provision was 2024 that we had to notify. It moved the goalpost to 2027 for any freshwater planning instrument that was impacted or required as part of a treaty settlement or not.
Doesn't stop us working on it.
Probably just a question to the committee. Just noting that when we started the plan change one, we were still trying to organise the systems of engagement between river partners, because it was a newly gained settlement, right, and the systems of council. I just note that we've rolled those over, and I'm just wanting to stop and say there's a point at which you're a settler to a iwi settle, to a settlement. So there's that point of engagement with council under your settlement. There's the JMA things you've agreed to, and then there's the te tira, sorry, what are we called now? When we all work together? Ngā tira mātauranga. Now, my question is, we treat engagement, mātauranga Māori and all of these as one big action. I don't think it's appropriate anymore. I want to ask Raviwi, how are you governing the mātauranga Māori that is gleaned through any process? Because it's yours, not council's. We're 10 years in now, we can make a different statement. My assumption of how mātauranga Māori is being treated and gained within these processes is that you have clear oversight, that you understand where it's held, that the integrity of that mātauranga is somehow led by you. If it isn't, I just think it's an inflection point now to ask, how would we be stronger now than we were 10 years ago when we started PC1 on all of those settings, because it's still yours, not ours as council. And I don't want to be the kaitiaki of things that aren't in council mandate. I think you need to be the kaitiaki of those, but I don't want to see engagement rolled into gathering mātauranga Māori, for which my council should not be the requisite decider of what's done with that. So I just raise that as a question, not for maybe today, Maria, but otherwise it is being held by me, and I get to say as council or mahuta, not as iwi mahuta, what happens with that, and that doesn't seem right. So question.
Thank you, Tipa.
Thank you. For myself, I'm seeking clarification on two matters that have been raised already. Firstly, the matter raised by Evelyn in regards to the RMA and those contradictory sections, especially in regards to another catchments. I can understand how they would have paramountcy, but within our particular catchment, of course, we have Te Ture Whai Mana, which we believe takes paramountcy. So for me, it's more around the intent of the regional council and how it will enact those two contradictory sections, considering Te Ture Whai Mana. And secondly, in regards to plan stop and plan change one, it's my understanding that plan change one's currently in the hands of a judge as we speak. So I suppose I'm seeking clarification, because there's a thing you stated that if it hasn't been to hearing or if it hasn't been to the appeals process, yet it's currently already in the hands of a judge who had released an interim decision, and why therefore it's not considered that it is in that situation where it is now exempt from plan stop. Thank you.
I'll start with the second one first. It is definitely in the hands of the court. So if they have too much information and confuse that, it is definitely in the hands of the court. It cannot be influenced by this committee, by council, by anyone. The decision of the court will be the final decision on Plan Change 1, and we hope to have that by the end of the year. Of course, that will be subject to appeals on matters of law only to the High Court. The provisions of the Act are quite explicit around the decision of the court, and we have outlined those, and they are messages that are on our website. I'm happy to send those messages out to all members so you can see that, but we've been very clear. As soon as the appeals were filed, the matter was out of council's hands. All those who appeared before the court, council staff, were officers of the court and signed the Environment Court's Code of Conduct. So I just want to be really clear there. Going back to the first question, what I would say is that's the conversation we need to have, having seen the final legislation last week or the week before, and exactly how, with Te Ture Whaimana having primacy as the direction-setting document for the Waikato and Waipa catchments, and should there be any inconsistency, then Te Ture Whaimana prevails. That is the conversation that we need to work through, that we're having conversations with MFE staff to say, there are 3 bits of legislation. There's a Ngāti Porou piece of legislation, there's Te Ture Whaimana, there's one other. How do these work? What do they look like? Have you considered from your perspective so we can understand what MFE is thinking? And then we need to have a conversation, and that is a conversation that we will be having at a technical level with Te Rōpū Hautu to begin to start nutting and unpacking the legislation to actually understand what it means, because the legislation was crafted very quickly with new bits coming in. We haven't been able to sit down and fully understand how it knits together for the freshwater planning review, not for Plan Change 1, because that's already on its journey.
Jackie?
Kia ora, Tracy, May. So thank you for confirming that the work will continue in the development of the Freshwater Policy Review, despite the central government legislative change that's in front of us. Really looking for engagement with River Iwi to include development of the proposed plan change content. So just wanting to lock that in as part of the overall engagement plan. So it's not just keeping us or our teams informed, but continuing to work alongside to develop that content. I have a question for you on what work is currently occurring outside of the Waikato River catchment in relation to freshwater policy matters. Given, I guess, we need to take an integrated approach, it would be, I think, inefficient to just focus on the Waikato River catchment when we're talking about the way for the whole Waikato and Waipa River catchment, when we're talking about the way for the whole Waikato region. So really interested in what WRC are doing in that respect. Kia ora.
Through the chairs, so when we talk about the freshwater policy review, that is for the entire region. So when we report into this committee, we are reporting that bit that relates to Te Ture Whaimana, and through which the joint management agreements provide for the constitution of this committee. So everything we're talking about that we bring to this committee, we are taking a region-wide lens. There are some things that obviously, given the catchments and the variability in the catchments, there may be matters that are of more importance over in Hauraki, over in Coromandel, or matters that are distinct to some of the West Coast areas that are not necessarily covered by Te Ture Whaimana. So all the work that we are doing is region-wide. What we have done by virtue of Plan Change 1 is we have built up a good knowledge of Waikato Waipa, and that's what's been reported to this committee. But everything that we're talking about, whatever topic, we are undertaking that region-wide. So freshwater policy review is for all the catchments of the Waikato region. When we report into this committee, it is for those conversations and those matters that are covered in addition through the joint management agreement provisions.
Yeah, it's probably just a corridor that we should have to talk about efficiency. Yeah, kia ora.
Yes.
We'll get the main man, Billy, to catch that one so we don't lose it. Evelyn.
Just thank you, Tracy. Just a quick partai around the Collaborative Science Advisory Group, and just see that they've met a couple of times, and just wondered really whether or not there'll be a technical report or something to that effect that will come out, and that would probably help to help to answer some of the partai that we may have around modelling and ensuring that we're able to quantify some of those requirements. And also, what's the main question? What's the main outcome of the group? Just if you could share a little bit about that, Mike. Kia ora. Thank you.
Kia ora, Evelyn. Through you, Chairs. There will be a summary report produced from the CSAG, so the Collaborative Science Advisory Group. Sorry, unwieldy acronym. We're looking to complete the series of initial meetings of that collaborative group by the end of October, with the draft of that summary report produced in November, final sign-off by Tracy and Bruce in early December. So the process is that we are capturing all of the content of each of the meetings, with 4 to 5 meetings being planned in total. Areas of agreement and disagreement between the group of experts highlighted in that report, focused very much on the questions that Naomi and the policy team have at the front of their mind in terms of what science advice is needed to give confidence in the direction of travel that's being considered. So, for example, technical views on, as one of the papers today covers, the approach to lake management within the region. And so that is a question for an upcoming meeting of the CSAG, is to test from a science perspective the relevance and the appropriateness of that approach to lakes management, given that we've got a group of people who have experience from throughout New Zealand in freshwater policy and science.
Thanks, Mike. And that the advice that you're giving, that would be quantified, like you've got the science to back it up. That you're basically saying that you are, but
Yes.
I'm just making sure that it's not just advice.
That's right. And actually, one of the questions that we are posing at our next meeting is how should we best approach areas where we have limited information, because there are definitely limits to our knowledge.
Thank you. And are there, given that golden clams are such a huge issue at the moment, and in the upper catchment, we're looking at more preventative measures than say the lower catchment, which will be looking at, how do we contain. Are these biosecurity breaches or pests, taken into consideration around, because there's got to be some new thinking around managing our waterways so that we're not unknowingly spreading the issue. So just ensuring that is taken into consideration as well.
Absolutely. There's many more in terms of the scope of the freshwater policy review. Naomi, Bruce wants to cover this, but the scope is much wider than Plan Change 1. So we do have to consider threatened species, pest species, things that impact on freshwater more broadly. So yes.
Thank you, Mike. And it is around that just different thinking. You know, we have to be looking at how we can manage those pests in a sense that, you know, some of the activities that we take for granted, you just can't do.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
that was highlighted, if I may, Chair, it was highlighted in the interim decision by the Environment Court on Plan Change 1, is that if we're actually going to drive improvements in freshwater, we're going to have to think more broadly than just managing nutrients and sediment. There's got to be thinking about flows and water levels, pest species as well.
Awesome. Hey, I'm going to look into the room. I think we are now segueing into probably the engagement update on freshwater policy review. So before I formally move us into there, can you receive the report? Sorry, Charlie?
Can I possibly test an amendment to the recommendation that's in front of us?
Sure, what are you
So
after,
I'd
mate?
like to keep the recommendation as is A. That the report Resource Management Consenting and Other Systems Amendment at Waiora Co-Governance Committee 9 B. And it's taken from the report itself, and that so I'm suggesting that for B we add that the committee explicitly notes, and this is the bit taken from paragraph 10 of the report, that the Act includes specific protections that ensure planning instruments intended to give effect to the Treaty of Waitangi settlement legislation, and in brackets settlement legislation, such as Te Ture Whaimana, are safeguarded from procedural delays and ministerial override under section 360 of the RMA. So the intent of the amendment is just to explicitly
Call that
out
out.
that part of the report, which is in the papers, so that people reading the minutes are aware that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to test that addition. Yep.
I'm happy to move.
Okay. Thank you. All in favour? None against? Carried. Awesome. So I'm going to. You're pointing. Okay. So we are now well into engagement update on freshwater policy review. Hey, I'm also really mindful of time. We're hoping for about a 12 p.m. closeout. So I'm not telling staff, I'm more telling governors. That's what we sort of said to ourselves. So again, hey, thank you for the paper. Awesome. Again, please don't take it as a reflection on the mahi you have done, more a compliment that it was so thorough. Key for you to just point out any key highlights you want us to note and then have any questions or reckons from the floor. Over to you.
Okay. Kia ora tātou. So yes, I will take the paper as read, and thank you, Maria, for for complimenting on that fabulous paper. Just a couple of points. I was going to bring up about CC, but you already know what Mike's about the collaborative stakeholder. The collaborative science advisory group. But just to, as you already know, that we're on pause with sector engagement and community engagement until we have clarity of national direction. But there's two pieces of engagement, streams of engagement we are doing, which is the collaborative science advisory group, and there's channels of engagement with tangata whenua engagement that you'll read within the paper. So are there any questions from anyone about those two work streams?
So Tracy sent out something to councillors, which Jordan has now circulated to the iwi members. So that's more on the engagement schedule. So happy to move as received, Madam Chair.
Pip, you got a question?
it comes back to, I guess, the point I was making before about the place of Mātauranga Māori in the previous work stream and in this one, and just leave that to you guys, but just note it.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Yeah, I was interested in the section on the collaborative group and the science advisory group. And we may have had it previously, I can't remember, but it would be nice if the attachment included the names of those people, because as governors, it's quite important, I think, for us to understand the breadth of what that group contains and whether in fact it does hit all of the relevant disciplines and sub-disciplines that would need to be brought to bear on an issue like this. So if we could just in future, don't need to do it now, don't need to tell us now, but in the future, a little appendix or something, just telling us the names and organisations that the group belong to.
Any other questions? Oh, awesome. Hey, thank you, Jackie, for your mahi. Yeah. Oh, sorry, there is a resolution that the report engagement update for freshwater policy review be received. Can I get a mover for that?
We have a mover, Noel.
No, Bruce.
Yeah.
Seconded. Kapai.
Done.
All in favour? Next item, structured reporting approach for the freshwater policy review. Naomi?
Can I ask a question? Does this not get superseded by the roadmap discussion?
Okay, cool.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Happy to move that it's received, Madam Chair.
Okay. Everyone comfortable?
Yep.
Charlie?
I'm comfortable with it being received. I just want one matter from.
Okay, go for it, mate.
And that is in regards to, I think it's paragraph number 25, with the scientific input and additional attributes for Māori freshwater values. So I'm basically just asking in regards to taiao practitioners and their ability to give input and whether any have been identified to support the scientific groups that will be having input to the report.
So for the collaborative science advisory group, the suite of skills we're looking for are primarily associated with environmental science. So we haven't got any iwi practitioners involved in that. There is, as in the papers, there is a separate work stream around Mātauranga and how we bring that knowledge base into the policy work as well. But I'm not sure, Nichelle, if that answers your question.
I suppose my question is really around at what point in time is that involvement in those Mātauranga and taiao practitioners brought in? I don't want it to be a situation where the scientific report is a fait accompli. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Just following on from that, I wonder, Mike, if you can think about how you'll embed our practitioners into, I guess, the environmental science stream, so it's not just an add-on, but is embedded all the way through the plan change provisions.
And as I say, there is a separate stream of work associated with the Mātauranga, which includes identifying knowledge sources, but also particular attributes. So feeding into the policy process in different places.
Yeah, well, what I'm asking is, can you think about how to integrate the two so it's not there's one thing happening here and another happening there, and a long time or a long way down the track we'll think about bringing them together, but how that can be done from the beginning.
Perhaps,
Just noting in support of the questions, ask back, because I don't think it's in Mike's particular wheelhouse, Mātauranga Māori. How do iwi want Mātauranga Māori governance to occur in terms of all of the frameworks that council uses? Because again, it's your Mātauranga generally, rather than defer it to, so what's the policy setting we can uphold, rather than defer it to Mike to exercise judgment over. Just asking, how would we prefer that Mātauranga Māori be governed for the purposes of this committee? Because that's, rather than bring it down to Mike. So what is perhaps the right thing is to ask for, what is the Mātauranga framework that we're using as council to guide us, because that's what these iwi should be governing, and having an insight into the settings around, rather than trusting that it's all occurring as you all might have in mind. I think it's better that the policy, that framework, governance framework, sits with you around Mātauranga Māori, and then you know what we are discharging to Mike. Trying to reverse engineer it,
Well, my
because you're trusting that it exists.
Well, my
And I'm saying it
attitude is
doesn't.
more that the plan change team think about the integration. Here, your kōrero, and it's a good one, and we need to think about that ourselves. But really, in the framing of the project, how might you integrate, particularly Mātauranga Māori and our practitioners who come with all of those knowledge sets into, I guess, the Western science view from the beginning.
And thank you, Trustee. I do recognise we've got a huge amount of that knowledge in the room here and in Te Raupu. So we'll take that away and think about how we can merge those streams. Kia ora.
Just one final comment.
Go for it. Dan, you're next.
Just, I guess, recognising Antoine in the room and the work that WRA are undertaking right now, which includes things like case studies, etc. I know that that's a work in progress as well, but looking at how we can utilise the work that's underway by various organisations all around trying to achieve te ture whaimana in the best way possible. So probably a kōrero to be had there by the project team and the WRA.
Gannon?
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, I agree with Jackie. In regards to Te Raupu Hautu, and obviously the importance of getting the Western science and Mātauranga having equal weighting in regards to what we want to achieve in Waiora. That's really important, but obviously how they engage with our practitioners, as Jackie was saying, how that happens, that's what we want to be able to see very clearly coming forward. Kia ora.
Thanks, Gan. Okay, well, if there's no further questions, we've got a mover for the resolution up there on the board. Jackie's happy to second. All in favour? Any against? Carried. Thank you. 7.4.
Can we go to the slideshow, please, Dawn? The down threatened species. Oh, so kia ora, Naomi Crawford, Team Leader Water Policy at Waiora Regional Council. So I'll just premise this at the beginning. I'll try and be brief as much as I can and stick to questions. I'm conscious of time. I just want to say that obviously this leads on from the previous hui that we had on the 21st of July, where we talked about farming activities and we talked about water quantity. So again, we're talking about high level options that the policy team are undertaking, and these will be thoroughly tested through engagement. So I guess the first one I just want to talk about is around threatened species. So that's on page 34 of your agenda pack. Key part here, being conscious of time, is that the Waiora Regional Plan really lacks the comprehensive provisions for managing threatened species and their habitats. It does not include mapping, measurable objectives or monitoring frameworks, and was developed prior to the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management. So this misalignment obviously creates legal vulnerabilities for Waiora Regional Council and undermines the effectiveness of freshwater ecosystem protection. So broader updates are really required to fully give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai, the hierarchy of obligations, and prioritising that ecosystem health. I think we'll just go to the next slide. That's all right, Jordan, thanks. So Waiora Regional Council have undertaken a piece of technical work. So we have got some scientific data. We've identified 65 threatened species in the Waiora region, 89 at risk, 13 data deficient species. These include fish, invertebrates, birds and plants, many of which are regionally endemic. So the the policy team is very much working with the science group to map those habitats, describe the ecological conditions, and identify those key threats. So this information is really feeding into the development of robust policy and a rule framework that will protect these habitats. And I'm happy to just leave it there, just to go straight to questions.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions?
Just a general one. Has the, I suppose, the new ingress of the clams been taken into account in regards to how that is going to affect and I suppose the survivability of some of these species in our waterways?
Yeah, the golden clams in particular, we are obviously, that's something within Waikato Regional Council, the biosecurity team as well. So we're working on alongside the other parts of the organisation to sort of test some of that thinking, and obviously particularly as we're developing some of these policies. So
yeah, I suppose I asked because we've got the identified threatened species. Has there been any movements in regards to your most vulnerable to your least vulnerable as a result? I mean, because I was one of the people sitting at Bob's Landing and just seeing some of the open mussel shells next to the clams of our native species. So obviously that incursion is further threatening our native species.
If I may, Chair, that's a really important point because we are already seeing signs that how the Waikato River functions is being impacted by clam. And for example, the arsenic levels we saw spiking in the river, there is evidence to suggest that that might be linked to large amounts of calcium being taken out of the water by clams as they grow, which reduces the I guess the buffering ability of the water. I'm not a chemist, so excuse me if I get that wrong, but there is already signs that the clams are having a change or leading to a change in how the river functions, and that will then lead to a changing conditions for the native species. So I think it's an important point you raise.
Any other questions?
Just a comment really. Thank you for the paper. Like I've mentioned a couple of times, I'd really like to give the kaupapa the time and attention that it deserves, which is not really possible at a hui like this. So really welcome that opportunity to go deeper into this kaupapa. Just want to really emphasise support for unique provisions being developed specific to our taonga species and protection of their habitat, and also noting that while Objective 1 of Te Ture Whaimana is articulated through the papers, that this particular kaupapa relates to many of our objectives in Te Ture Whaimana, including our relationship as river iwi to our taonga and to our awa. So I guess in the articulation of the policy context, if you can bear that in mind, so it's not simply a compliance with national policy statements, etc., and we don't get stuck on just the first objective of Te Ture Whaimana, but think more deeply about how subjects like this touch on delivery of Te Ture Whaimana in its fullest extent. Good on Amy.
Thanks, Jack. Any other questions? Okay, well, on that basis, I'm going to ask that we move to receive the report. Can I get a mover? Stu, Councillor Downard, all in favour? Any against? Carried.
Yep, that's right, me again. So this paper is on page 46, I think, of your agenda pack, 7.5. So the purpose of this paper is to describe, I guess, the introduction of the Freshwater Policy Review and the topic of fish habitat and fish passage. So it's important that that obviously Te Ture Whaimana as well remains the overarching directive, emphasising the restoration of native fisheries and the removal of migration barriers. currently the Waikato Regional Plan and Waikato Regional Policy Statement there is some lack of provisions for sort of damming, diversion and structures in river and lake beds, and they don't fully reflect the ecological and cultural significance of fish passage. So one thing we have done though is we have included a compulsory objective around fish passage into the Waikato Regional Plan without a Schedule 1 process, which we're allowed to do. Yeah, and we did that. So currently that is something that we have done to date. So I'll just cut to the probably next slide, if that's all right, Jordan. So another thing that was important through Te Raupuhoto as well, they talked about how we can bring to life some of these papers. So I've tried to emphasise here where there has been some real world examples of things that have been done to address fish passage. So in the paper, we talk about the Mangawhiro pump station, which you can actually see on the right there, where they've put in an Archimedes screw structure there to obviously enhance fish passage. Another thing the Waikato Regional Council is doing is the Pathways to the Sea strategy, which involves innovative approaches to improving fish passage in partnership with iwi. The council is also developing a regional infrastructure strategy to identify in priority catchments and appropriate interventions around fish passage. And important to note that the zone management plans as well are recognised as essential for supporting that habitat restoration and community engagement. So I guess I just emphasise there that, again, the NPSFM national requires councils to develop action plans for fish passage, including identifying and remediating barriers. So even though this is outside of the scope of the Freshwater Policy Review, it's something that WRC needs to do. And that's integral to obviously achieving those freshwater ecological goals that we want to achieve. So again, we recommend, I guess, updating the Waikato Regional Plan to embed Te Mana o Te Wai, align with the best practice and reflect those cultural values. And we'll continue to refine our approach, obviously, as we go through this process post-December 2027 as with the new RMA requirements we talked about earlier. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, just a comment. I really appreciate the fact that we are now looking at fish passage so that, for example, obviously our taonga species and eel are able to migrate back through our waterways. I suppose one thing that it does raise for me, someone who actually resides in Taupo currently, is that there are invasive species which also will be then therefore navigating those fish passages. So I suppose just asking that when we're developing that, if we could also give thought to developing how we would protect our waterways from new incursions, from biosecurity risks, and alert people. Because if it's flowing, the river's flowing one way and the species go one way, now they can go back to going both. It could lead to further incursions. Okay.
Nice. Any other questions? Cool. Well, on the basis of that, I'm happy to put the resolution that the report be received. Can I get a mover? Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Councillor Kneebone. All in favour? Any against? Carried. Awesome job, mate. Awesome job. Lucky last.
Lucky last. So the last paper is, I'll refer to page 57 now, 7.6. And if we can go to lakes, I think. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Jordan. Great. So this one here it's a complex space to talk about the lakes. I must say, I'll just say at the beginning, the strategy, obviously, for the lakes management approach is very much guided by Te Ture Whaimana, which sets that overarching vision and restoring and protecting the water bodies, and so that they're safe for swimming and gathering food. You'll see in the paper it's pretty lengthy and starts to get into a lot of detail about noting that many of the shallow peat and riverine lakes, obviously in the region, are suffering from nutrient enrichment, sedimentation, invasive species, and altered hydrology, which is a key issue for those lakes. We touch on in the paper about proposed plan change 1 and where the interim decision, the challenges that it introduces there. How do we reduce contaminant loads? So the decision has been helpful, and obviously talking about excluding stock from lake margins and supporting those restoration efforts, and yeah, to improve water quality. So again, like in the previous paper, we're trying to highlight here some case studies about the work that local solutions that have been underway in the region, to give you that local context. So we talk about Lake Kemahia, Lake Whangapai, Lake Naroto and Waiwhakariki in the paper. And that's really demonstrates, I guess, that collaborative restoration efforts that the community has made. And it highlights the importance of that riparian planting, wetland rehabilitation and pest control and community engagement through the process. So if we go to the next slide, Jordan. So this next slide focuses on the policy options that the team is starting to get to grips with. So again, I'd premise that this will be thoroughly tested by engagement. The draft policy approach categorises those lakes into 3 groups based on the level of improvement required to meet those water quality targets. So that's minor, moderate and significant. Tailored management strategies will be developed for each group. So for lakes requiring moderate improvement, the policy builds on proposed plan change 1, as I was just talking about before, minimum farming standards, farm environment plans, nutrient loss modelling and controls on intensification. For lakes needing significant restoration, more stringent measures such as land use change and infrastructure investment may be required. We also note in the paper that Lake Taupo, the nitrogen trading scheme, will be retained as a separate framework due to its unique context. And we also talk about in the paper about the inclusion of the development of action plans for individual or grouped lakes, supporting that non-regulatory approach and catchment-based collaboration. I also noted in the paper as well about environmental flows and lake levels, which is another bugbear with the proposed plan change 1. And so we talk about that in the paper as well. So the review, so next steps are definitely the review of obviously the proposed plan change 1 provisions when we do get that final decision into 2026. We're looking at consistency with national direction, and there's lots of instruments there. And overall, the lakes management approaches, we're trying to develop an adaptive, evidence-based and designed to deliver that long-term improvements in lake health. And that will take an integrated planning, regulation and partnership with iwi in our communities. So I'll just leave it there.
Any questions?
I'll just make a brief observation in the conclusion. You left out Waipakariki, which for me was quite worrying, because I know the English term such as means examples, that's fine. But the point I wanted to make about Waipakariki, it is an example of what can be achieved when the catchment is actually completely controlled and revegetated. And so it's a form of baseline that is giving us some insights into what the system used to be like before anthropogenic or human impact. Really important. As a model example, what is the baseline?
Surround it and reintroduce some certain birds. And
it's going to have a predator-free fence soon. Yeah. But I also note that, and I've put that deliberately beside our co-chair, the Lake book, the Lake publication that's just come out. And I wondered, Mike, whether you just want to say something about that?
Yes.
The topic is lakes.
Absolutely. So I don't know, Chair, if you'd like to hold, have people seen the book in the flesh?
Yeah, I did have a photo there in the slideshow.
In the slide, yes. So that book has been a long labour of love by 3 co-editors, Dennis Oskandachi from the University of Waikato and Natasha Granger from our Integrated Catchment Management Directorate, and Tracy Dean Spears, who I think is now working at Waikato River Authority. Yeah, I think there's something like 80 contributors to the book, and it really captures the state of our knowledge of the several hundred lakes that we have in the region. So we can certainly point you in the direction of finding a copy of that. I might look at seeing how we might get people a copy if they would be interested.
Signed copies on the go, you reckon?
Signed by all,
Copies?
signed by all 80 might be a
Yeah, oh.
stretch.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
I thought it was too good an opportunity. You get the story out.
Yeah. Charlie?
Hi, just for myself, I was just wondering if you could point me to, just send it via email afterwards, just definitions for those specific groupings that you have those titles. So what is considered minor, moderate, significant?
Mr. Jordan, you send me this paper, 7.6. Just that paper, not the whole agenda again.
Any other questions? Hey, awesome job, Naomi. I'm going to put the resolution to receive the paper. Can I get a mover? Thank you, Jackie. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Downard. All in favour? Anyone against? Carried. Thank you, my mate.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for coming today and working our way through this in a new way. And I look forward to more new ways in the future, assuming some of us might be back around the table. Yeah, but apart from that, I'm wondering, Stu, whether you wanted to close us out?
O tēnā koroa I tō mahi, tōkoroa mahi whakahori, koutou katoa, mihi nui tēnei I te kororo pai, te whakaro pai, tēnā koutou, anei te Karakia Whakamutunga. Unihia mai te uru tapu nui, kia wātea, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua, I te ara takatū. Koe rā I rongo, whakiria aki kei ronga, kia tīna, haumi e, hui e, tai.
Certainly. There you go. Well done.